Every club.
Every day.
The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Newcastle podcast. And we are back with Tactics Tuesday. But before we get into this evening's topics, let me introduce who I'm joined by. First of all, I'm joined by Nicola Pringle-Adams. How's it going, Nicola?
Hello. That was a full name introduction.
Oh, yes.
I wasn't expecting that.
I figured I've spent enough time with you now. I have to stop just saying Nick, Kev, Iain, and actually follow Ian's structure by getting everyone's full names in there. So, bit of professionalism now. I'm hitting it. But I am also joined by, and I've also just mentioned him, Iain Mackay. How's it going, Iain?
Thank you very much, Michael. I didn't know I had a structure. To be honest, I'm not sure what's going to come out of my mouth until it's out. So I'm glad that can be mistaken as having some degree of structure sometimes. But yeah, I'm doing great, Michael. And you look well. You sound very cheerful, particularly given our last two performances.
Yeah, well, there is a reason for that. I was 30,000 feet in the air for the Palace game, so I didn't have to watch it. And West Ham, well, it's been a week since I've done a podcast, but the last one I did was the review on West Ham, and, you were a little bit shocked how positive I was. So, maybe, just maybe, we'll have a little bit more of that today. Although since I've been positive, we've started getting really bad results. So maybe Mr. Misery should return. But I thought I'd start off today's Tactics Tuesday by looking at a small selection of our first 16 games so far this season and split them into categories. And the reason I'm saying this is because I've seen a lot on the fan base recently, and I'll be honest, a little bit from last night's pod, comparing West Ham and Palace. A few murmurs that there were similar games. I'll be honest, of what I've seen of Palace and what I saw on Monday night. Very different games. So I thought I'd set them up just with a few episodes of the season, just, let's set some standards for Newcastle United, where we should be, because some people think we should be top four, consistently playing well. Other people seem to think we should be fighting for mid-table, the way it sounds. But start off, if we look at good results, before we deep dive into any proper analysis, I would say, we're pretty spoilt for choice. Arsenal, Forest, Spurs, Man City, all immediately come to mind as good results and good performances. But I'd say the Forest example was our best example, should I say, of a good result and a good performance. Would you both agree we were pretty much top form there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Agreed.
Yeah, spot on. And believe it or not, teams can play well and get bad or less than desirable results. Would we agree Everton and Brighton are good examples of that? Or would you say we didn't play well against one of those?
No, I agree with that one as well.
I think if any one of our players had their shooting boots on, the results would have been very different in both of those games.
100%.
Absolutely. Played to a good standard, and the only goal we conceded was an individual mistake. So, where I'm going with this, and the point I want to make, is that context is important, obviously, but I've seen a fair bit online, as I mentioned, the comparisons between West Ham and Crystal Palace. And I think, honestly, the West Ham performance, I thought overall we were very good. We just couldn't put the ball in the back of the net. It was mentioned last night, we could have had 4 and nobody really would have batted an eyelid. You two watched the full of the Palace game. I didn't, so it's pretty unfair for me to give my overall analysis. So I'm going to chuck it on the pair review. What was alarmingly different between the two performances, or would you say they were actually more similar than I'm being led to believe? What do you think, Iain?
Well, I think we started really well against West Ham. And it could have been so much more different. West Ham did come out like a team that was struggling for form. They were. You could almost see their knees knocking. And then we created 3 or 4 fabulous opportunities. Isak scored a really good goal, which unfortunately was marginally offside. I think if that counts, then we go on and win that by 3 or 4 goals.
Agreed.
However, silly individual mistake gives them a free header, and they take the lead. And almost from that point, it was like you could see the confidence slipping away. Now, we took about 10 minutes to regroup and pushed on again in the first half, but unfortunately didn't score. The second half started very much like the first. We were attacking, And again, I think it's 53 minutes that we give away the second goal and we're 2 down. And at that point, confidence just went like a bubble popping.
Yes.
That said, all from the 30th minute onwards, I was saying to the chap I was sitting next to in the ground, because I was at that, there's no intensity here. We're not pressing like we should be pressing. I think that was very similar trait to how we played against Crystal Palace. So yes, I think that we started really well against West Ham. We created some chances. We had some shots. We missed some sitters, but there wasn't very much in the second half of that. And of course, that was continued into the Palace game where we didn't create a single shot. We apparently had one shot, which was a blocked shot, but neither Joe nor I could remember who it was who'd had a shot that was blocked.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the key frustrating aspect in comparison to how well we had played when we'd beaten Arsenal and we'd beaten Nottingham Forest and we'd beaten the Chelsea B team to get through in the Cup is that intensity, which we had been missing at the start of the season, but had come back for those games and we'd had the results to match it, that just has non-existent. They haven't pressed with any conviction in either the West Ham game after the first 10 minutes of the West Ham game, or at all in the Crystal Palace game.
Yeah.
And I am not sure. I mean, we can talk about this later on, and I'll shut up and let Nicola have a say. I'm not sure if there's not an attitude problem in our team, given that what we do best has been so successful at the start, whether they can get up for every single game now or not. To me, it looks like intensity can be our identity if we're playing another team that has aspirations of reaching the top 6.
Yeah.
But anybody else, certainly against West Ham, certainly against Crystal Palace, we kind of think if we rock up, we're so good. We've got Isak, we've got Bruno, we've got Gordon. It's going to come for us. And of course, it doesn't.
Would you agree with that, Nicola, or are there anything you'd like to add?
To be honest, I think Ian's sort of hit the nail on the head. I touched on this when we reviewed the West Ham game, and I did say it looked as though we could have gone 2, 3, 4-0 up at points because of our intensity in them sort of first 30 minutes. And then our intense and high press just completely lacked off towards the end of that game. And like Ian touched on, it was almost as if our confidence had just dipped ever so slightly. And unfortunately for me, I couldn't go to the Crystal Palace game, so I had to catch up, like you, Michael, online and on the TV and things like that. And from what I was reading and seeing, I just thought it looked almost as though how we ended the West Ham game was completely how we went into the Crystal Palace game. And I don't know if it was you two I was with or, Kevin Joe. I am a little bit concerned that there's a bit of not something going on behind the scenes with some of our players, but just like Ian's just touched on, a bit of an attitude problem. Though there was, Alexander Isak, I thought, and I can't remember if it was the Crystal Palace game or the West Ham game, so forgive me, but he was making really selfish decisions, wasn't sort of releasing the ball, was sort of keeping it to himself. And that was, to me, is a little bit, we've seen in the Arsenal game, he wasn't doing that in different games. So I don't know, it all just kind of transpired into the Crystal Palace game and from the West Ham game that our intensity just sort of died off a little bit. Yeah, and I couldn't tell you what. I haven't got anything else to add to Ian's point other than agreeing that our high press and intensity is just completely lacked off in the past 2 games, which doesn't bode me with confidence for Wednesday.
Yeah, to be honest, I agree as well. I think we've mentioned numerous times in games, intensity is supposed to be our identity, but we haven't seen nearly enough of it this season. And to be honest, we saw it very scarcely last season.
Yeah.
But when we did see it, there was signs that Newcastle United, this could go on to have a brilliant season this campaign. And it hasn't really hit the ground running yet. Now, the reasons for that, I can't tell you. I'm not if I could, I'd be paid millions of pounds. But I think it is very interesting that, we've touched on, and to be honest, the rest of the team with you, Ian, touched on behaviours yesterday as well, that Isak, Gordon, etc., haven't really hit the heights we expected of them. That could be because Gordon's been mainly played out of position, with Joe Linton in his preferred position for the last few games. Or it could just be that transfer talk is getting the better of them. Or it could be something completely unrelated. But something that is related to fantastic podcasts is our next advert, which will be brought to you by Zencastr.
Do you have a story to tell that the world needs to hear? Have you struggled with reaching new audiences who are engaged with your story? It might be time for you to start a podcast. Let me tell you about a platform we use here at Global Sports Podcast Network. Zencastr makes it easy to start a high-quality podcast built for growth from day one. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes ums, ahs, you knows, and 22 other speech patterns, Zencastr makes it super easy to start a podcast that sounds great. Ready to tell your story? Check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr.
Absolutely fantastic, Iain. Thank you very much. And we are back. Now, I wanted to move straight into our second topic of the today, and it kind of links in with what we ended the first half with, which is our left-hand side. A lack of balance has led to Eddie Howe tweaking his wingers and central midfielder combinations numerous times in recent games. And when we spoke after the Arsenal game, we thought, Joe Willock and Joe Linton on that left-hand side, that's the answer. They bring all the energy we need, and there's not going to be a team in the Premier League that can keep up with that intensity and that energy. We haven't really seen it since. You could argue Nottingham Forest, but Joe Linton's best moments arguably came when he was on the right side instead of the left. So I'm starting to think that might only be the answer in games where our back's against the wall, where we're up against a team that, let's say, as you mentioned, in the top six, fighting for the same aspirations we have. Maybe that's the reason why that energy is there, rather than Joe Willock and Joe Linton. And when we need more creativity to negate the low block, or even in 50-50 games, that, let's be honest, at the weekend when we play Brentford, that's going to be an incredibly, they're incredibly strong at home. It's going to be 50-50, and to be honest, I don't think many fans will be looking forward to it given Brentford's record, but we tend to play well against them. But that's not the only one in the next three games. We've got Liverpool at home in midweek, and Leicester at home next weekend. So the question I'm going to ask you is, what do you both think? Do Willock and Joe Linton start on the left side and Gordon on the right side? Does it still look like the answer for these three games? Or would you be tempted to switch things up in any of these games? Nick, I'll go to you first because we went to you very late in the first part.
I have personally said before on these pods that I actually really like the Joe Willock and Joey Linton left-hand side balance and Gordon out on the right. Now, I completely appreciate that that's Gordon out of position. But however, he performs incredibly well on the right. I know we've just spoke about the West Ham and Crystal Palace game, and obviously they weren't results that we obviously desired or wanted. But it's not just him that's on that pitch. There's 10 others with him. Do you know what I mean? So you can't just solely blame it on, the left-hand side and the right-hand side. Personally, for me, I really like the balance of Joe Willock and Joey Linton on the left-hand side. I think it works. I do think teams particularly when Eddie first started it, I don't think teams expected it, and I don't think teams could keep up with it. And obviously they weren't expecting to face Anthony Gordon on the right. And I think a few of us have said, until January, Anthony Gordon is the answer, and the balance that Eddie seems to have found, it kind of is the answer because it seems to be working, or did, obviously, despite the last two results. For me, I can't see what he could I don't know what he can change without obviously any transfers. So for me personally, I'd keep it how it is. It seems to be working, but I don't know. I mean, like I say, I'm not paid millions of pounds. I'm not Eddie Howe, so don't know.
What about you, Iain? You got a clue?
I think that I think we're too predictable, and I think that is because Eddie will name an unchanged side, or will name a side with one change in it very regularly.
Yeah.
I think I heard over the weekend that so far Newcastle have played 19 first team players, which is the least number of players any team in the Premier League have used so far.
That's correct.
And I think he needs to mix things up a little bit, maybe to keep some sides guessing. Certainly, I like Willock. He's got almost a telepathic understanding with Joe Linton, which is only enhanced when Lewis Hall is on his game and playing alongside with them as well. I don't think that's the right combination to play against Liverpool, though. I think we need Joe Linton's brutality and aggression in midfield against Liverpool. So maybe I'll play Gordon down the left. Willock wouldn't get a start for me. I'd have Joe Linton go into midfield. I think Willock's a great player. As you know, he's my tip for Newcastle's Player of the Season. Although when I talked to that fellow at West Ham, he then played as if he'd put his boots on the wrong feet. But yeah, I think it needs to be more mixing up. I think people have got to be non-offended if they don't make the starting 11. Is Gordon the solution down on the right? He might be, but then I think he's a solution down on the left as well. What
I
I
agree.
do think we need to bring in on these games, I think Trippier needs more game time. He's the only guy in the last month who's shown that he can actually cross a ball. Our crossing and our corner taking is fairly woeful, although admittedly Tonali put one or two good corners in. We just didn't have anybody in the middle to go for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would mix things up. I'll tell you what I'm looking forward to being able to see, and maybe this is where we get around the low block, when Wilson can start and Isak goes down the left, then Gordon goes down the right. That is a forward line to terrorise any mid-table to lower table side, particularly if you've got Tonali and Bruno finding a way to work together in midfield. That should get us a foothold in any game. I'm reminded when you said we're playing Brentford again about last year's Brentford game where we were truly awful in the first half and went in one down. And it was Wilson and Isak together who turned that on its head for us to be 2-1 ahead after an hour. And we played that one out to win. So, yeah, more variety in your starting lineup, Eddie. Not because you have to pick you're trying to pick the best 11 available to start. I think that we can hold some guys back tactically for them to come on and do their thing against a team that's already been battling against an hour of intensity. But that's definitely the one change I hope we can make, whether it's on the left wing or the right wing or the midfield. They need a rocket up them to tell them to press, to be intense, to be bold. You remember last year against Aston Villa where they went man to man and pressed like mad, and we thought we were going to get stuffed, and we won 3-1 at Aston Villa.
Yeah.
Let's have some more games like that where we are on the affirmative side, where we're making decisions, we're driving the game. We're not just sitting back, soaking it up, going side to side to side to side, which is what we did against Palace without any idea of how to move the ball forward into anywhere of any danger. Honestly, that's 2 hours I wish I'd never wasted. Sorry, I don't know if that answered your question, Michael. I've just started ranting again about the Crystal Palace game. I do apologise.
I asked you for one answer. I think you gave me three, to be honest. So
Okay.
more than what I asked for, more bang for my buck. Absolutely great. Yeah, to be honest, I do agree that you make a great point with the 19 or I think 19 or 20 players used. It is the lowest in the league this season, as you mentioned, and it is one of those where you know what's coming, and that's mainly because of injuries potentially. But now is the stage. You're in December. What were you going to add?
Oh, I just I've got something to add, but I didn't want to interrupt in the middle of a
Oh,
sentence.
it's all right. It's all right. Don't
All I
worry.
was going to say in introducing some variety into the starting lineup, we have Lewis Miley playing for the under-23s. He's been injured, but he's played some matches. He's been fit for a month now. He's in the England under-21 side that just turned 18 because he is an absolutely superb midfield player. He might be the man who can find that forward pass to break through the lines against the teams with the low block. If Bruno and Tonali are proving themselves incapable of doing that, Lewis Smiley's got an eye for a fantastic pass because he is brilliant. Let's see. Let's give him a go. let's give Asula a go against some of these lower defences.
Mm.
Asula looks like a brute. He looks strong. He looks fast. He looks like a willing runner. But we
Yeah.
don't even bring him on. We don't even
No.
bring him on. And if they've got a week's worth of coaching as to how they're going to shackle Isak and Gordon, Asula on, they've never heard of him. They won't know what the hell he's going to do. I just think we need to switch it up. We just need to be unpredictable. And
Yeah,
then we've got a
exactly.
chance of actually catching somebody off guard instead of them knowing exactly what's going to come at them before they've even got off the bus and got changed and got on the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think in the same vein, I mean, we've just said this, but I think for the Liverpool game, I'd maybe be a little bit more tempted to keep things as they are, maybe go with the same game plan as Arsenal. But then against Leicester, for example, let's try, new players in the wings, put a Murphy in there, maybe even an Almiron to start, Barnes and Gordon, you could switch them up. Maybe midfield three of Tonali, Willock, Bruno, three your better ball players on the ball. And then Brentford, that's the tricky game. No disrespect to Leicester. But Brentford, one of the best teams in the league at home this season. They're one of those teams that you're going to have to stand up and go blow for blow. And it could be a 1996 Newcastle 4-3 or something like that. They're that kind of team. Or you sit back and you try and counter attack. So they're the kind of team that you've got to outrun, you've got to outwork. So maybe you go a bit more of a conservative approach, but you have Willock, Bruno, and Longstaff in midfield, your three best runners. You maximise maneuverability. You sacrifice Joe Linton and Tonali, but you also give them a bit of a rest. It's that sort of luxury that Newcastle have right now, but whether we get to use it or not, who knows?
Yeah.
But on that point, I'm aware we've gone a little bit over, so I'm going to go into our second advert of the day from the Global Sports Podcast Network.
This podcast is part of the Global Sports Podcast Network, the only network bringing you exclusive daily news and views on your Premier League team, the Premier League, women's football and fantasy football. A unique listening experience that puts fans first, bringing you the very latest breaking news from your team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and make us your first listen every day. Global Sports Podcast Network, every club, every day.
Absolutely fantastic, Nicola. Thank you very much.
No
Now,
problem.
when we look at the summer, hindsight tells you that we probably should have spent some money, but hindsight's a lovely thing. We didn't spend all that much in the summer. We did spend 15 million on Asula, which, as Ian's mentioned, if he's not getting any game time, now seems quite confusing to be honest. But if there is a kitty available in January, and don't give me a name of a cat now, like a Siamese or something like that. Don't go that way. But what type of player do Newcastle need to bring in to solve their biggest problem, which is negating the low block? So we could be a number 10, it could be a winger, could be a roughhouse and centre forward. Nick, I'll let you start. Which way do you want to go?
Oh, I don't want to be negative, but I think I'm going to have to be.
Oh. Ian, cut her off.
Sorry.
We can't have negativity. That's my job.
No, not so much negative. I just think, look, Eddie is obviously going to need a little bit of support during either the January window or the summer window. It's probably likely going to be more the summer window, isn't it? Let's be honest. I think I've already heard a rumour to say that we won't be buying big or buying at all in the January window. So that's perfect. We've covered it so much even before the season started of that our right hand side is just not where it needs to be. So a right winger is definitely needed. And I am either going to chuck it. I'm also going to chuck in to the mix. I would be buying a striker. I know we've got Osula and Isak and Wilson on his day, but I am a bit bored of the cycle of Wilson gets injured, Isak's fit. Wilson comes back, Isak's injured. And it just seems to be this rotating circle of one of them's not fit, one of them's injured, one of them, it's just a bit boring. And it also doesn't fill me with confidence that when we rely on Alexander Isak for about 60% of the games. So I would even chuck in there that we need to start maybe looking at a striker. I do feel sorry for Osula. I can never pronounce his name. Osula? Is that how you pronounce it?
That's enough.
But yeah, because I agree with Iain. I think he's going to be one to look out for, and I think he will put in some decent performances when he's obviously gets the minutes, and that's obviously the big if and when he gets put on. So my two things that I'll be looking at is definitely a striker and a right winger. That is what I would be replacing. Who I don't know.
Well, thankfully, that's my follow-up question. No, it's not. I figured,
There's
wouldn't be
too
able to
many.
name a perfect replacement in
Yeah.
5 minutes. That's what scouts are for. But, Iain, do you agree on the positions, or have you got something else in mind?
On scouting, if they're earning their money, they could dig out a Delap, couldn't they? They could
Yeah.
find a player that we could get for 12 or 15 million pound who could come in and be an upgrade on Miggy and Jacob Murphy, because I like both of those players and they've been great, both been good servants, but you know, they're the weak link. They're not getting picked. Anthony Gordon's being played out of position to cover that.
Yeah.
So let's see if the scouts can earn their money and find something that we can afford. I'm less inclined to go and buy a centre forward when we already did that and haven't really used him. And to be honest, if Osula has been protected from playing in the Premier League, he's got more Premier League games under his belt than Tonali has at the
Yeah.
moment, because he played 30 odd games in the Premier League for Sheffield United. And if you think that he's going to be disappointed by finding it tough playing centre forward for Newcastle against Leicester, for example, how tough was it to play centre forward for Sheffield United in the last season when they were getting stuffed off everybody?
That's a very
So
good point.
I would definitely leave centre forward. I think we really missed out when we courted and talked and then didn't buy a player like James Maddison.
Mm.
I think somebody like that who can shield the ball but look up and pick a pass 20 yards further up the pitch than Bruno or Tonali seemed comfortable in doing. That's what's needed to unlock these teams in the low block. Now, maybe we spent all of our cash that we had to buy a player like that by finding a substitute 40 million left winger in Barnes or a 55 million substitute for Bruno in Tonali. But that's what I think was missing was a number 10, who can thread a pass through the eye of a needle and see a pass before any of the defenders have spotted it's there.
Yeah.
Maybe that's Lewis Miley. Who knows? But that's who I think we're missing in this team, and that's why you will watch the ball go backwards and forwards from fullback to fullback via Shearer and Burn so often before it moves forward that they've got all 11 players in their defensive position before we even try and look for that ball.
Yeah.
It's just all got to be much faster.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, to be honest, the only thing I'd like to add is generally agreeing with Nick, but if we were going to bring in a striker, you'd want like a rough brick hit house style of striker, like a Diego Costa style when he was at Chelsea, or maybe an Alexander Mitrovic when he was here, just without the red cards, and someone who could put the ball in the back of the net when he was here. Yeah, you learned how to do that when you were away, didn't you? It's fine, I've got over that. But we put in so many crosses every single game. And I haven't looked at the stats, so we could be at the bottom of the crosses table and I look like an idiot. But it feels like and you've mentioned it, Iain, we put in so many crosses and they just go nowhere. Either it's, 7 yards over the player and it goes out for a corner on the other side, or it just narrowly misses the striker, which is arguably the more frustrating ones. But also, most of these balls are being played into Alexander Isak, and let's be honest, he's quite a fragile player. He's not really the kind of player that's, going to do what, let's say, Wilson did against Spurs last season and, try and roughhouse the goalkeeper and injure himself in the process. Or, like maybe something we could ask a little bit more of Osula. We train him a little bit more in that the physicality of the game, because he's a big lad. He's a massive player and he's got a bit of bulk on him. So, he's clearly been hitting the gym. But the one thing is, if you can beat players in the air and you can become good at heading the ball and actually have that presence and that sense to know where the ball's coming and know what to do, you'll be a striker that you might not make it in the next 10 years of Newcastle United, where hopefully we're playing like, let's say, Arsenal or Liverpool or Man City. Beautiful free-flowing football. But when it's looking for that option B, who can just put the ball in the back of the net, when the ball comes in, he knows exactly where it's going, heads across goal, back of the net. We've been backs against the wall for 20 minutes, but we've managed to roughhouse a goal, which we saw so many times with Callum Wilson in his prime. Unfortunately, he's not quite there yet. I would like to see us potentially bring in a striker, but go on, Ian. I know you got something to add.
You've just made me think, and it would be hilarious and ironic that the best header of the ball in going forward for Newcastle is Joe Linton. And to say that would be a massive revelation if you could move Joe Linton into centre forward to do that, allowing you to play Gordon down the left, give Isaacs a big man to play off. This is ridiculous. But actually, that's what Joe Linton started life at under Stevie Bruce, isn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
He's a much better player than he was under Steve Bruce. So, why not? If he's a right winger, he could easily be a centre forward as well. And I think he has got the physical presence to be able to get on the end of some of those crosses. Maybe that's something that we could try. If Eddie's trying to shake things up and nobody's expecting it, let Joe Linton play number 9. Next time he's limps off after 20 minutes.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would be expecting the revelation of Joe Linton going back into centre forward, but it's not a bad point at all, because he is our best header of the ball. He's probably the worst kicker we have in striker of the ball, should I say, we have in centre midfield. But when it comes to actually getting on the end of crosses and being that physical presence, he is there. But most of the time, when we get down the wing and we've got that pace to beat the man and get the ball in, he's on the edge of the box. And if it comes out and falls to him, he's sitting there going, "Don't shoot, don't shoot, don't shoot, don't shoot, please don't shoot." So maybe a little bit further forward, maybe that's the idea of putting him at left wing. And we did say that with the physicality before that's the reason he's there. But it's all something to think about. Football is a complex and beautiful game, but sometimes it can be so simple as to just remember when we just crossed it to Andy Carroll every single game and hoped for the best. Maybe we could go back to that, which would be very, very depressing. But it's an option B. And with that, I'm going to leave Nicola and Ian to get on with the rest of their days. Although we do have another podcast being recorded just after this with the Liverpool guys. So be sure to check that out with Ian and Joe. But for now, we are going to say goodbye.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.